Yeah.
with others.
Yeah. So there's another very important distinction in NVC that I wanted to get across, and this is when we experience a need being fulfilled, it's an energetic experience. We feel it as a flow. And the emotional meaning we give to it most always has expressions of joy or happiness, or you can say a smile. And energetically, when it's fulfilled, there's a sense of release or relaxation, a kind of flow or radiance that occurs. And that's what I would call the fullness of the need, or the beauty inherent in that need. It's not just an intellectual concept. There's an actual beauty to that quality of life when we experience, even if it's just a little taste of, smile, or, oh, a sense of fulfillment, or, boy, I was really seen in that moment and understood. And I feel a sense of relaxing, a warmth, the kind of relaxed knowing that happens when there's trust, perhaps. So, and the distinction is when our need is not met, when we are experiencing what I would call the lack or the unmetness or the deficient state of a need not being met, there's a corresponding feeling in the body. What would that feel like?
Shrinking.
Sinking?
Shrinking.
Shrinking, yeah.
Tension.
Tension, yeah.
Heavy.
Heavy,
Tight.
tight, yeah. All of those, for me, describe a kind of contraction or constriction or a knotting of that basic life flow. So on an energetic level, when our needs are not met, what we're actually experiencing is a constriction of the life flow, the sense of deficiency. What I have found is that whenever there is that level of unmet need, when there's what I would call the deficient state, the constrictive, contractive, energetic state, there's always a story that goes along with it. There's always a thought, always a story. I'm wondering if anybody has identified your own story, that just by me bringing that example, what kind of thought or story would come up if in an imagined unmet need that you have?
Well, if the person doesn't want to go to the movies with me, she doesn't care about me.
She doesn't care about me, yeah. Or I might have said something that might have stimulated a discomfort or pain in another person. I go, there I go again. I'm always hurting other people, and I feel this constriction in me.
Not important.
Or I'm not important, yeah. There's always a story that goes with the deficient sense of the unmet need. It's, yes.
Conversely, is there a story that goes with the met?
No, that's a difference. It's not a story.
It's an open space.
It's a resonance with the heart, and in the heart there is no thinking per se. So there's a meaning that we give to it. But if someone does something in relationship to me that meets a need that is supportive and warm and loving, there's not a story. It's a simple observation. It's a recognition and a resonance of that gift that's being offered to me. So a story is something that I define as some kind of evaluative, analytical, diagnostic thinking about what happened that usually carries judgment. Whether we can regard or label the judgment as positive or negative, it still is a kind of thinking that's disconnected from this feeling place in our heart. Yes?
So what would be the need in that example of the story that you just gave? Here I go again, hurting other people.
What would be the need? I like the question. So if I'm going to transform that through self-empathy, I say, here I go again, I'm hurting other people. That would be the life alienating form if I judge myself and I feel constricted. If I want to empathize to that, I might say, I guess I'm really feeling hopeless and helpless here because I want to be able to find a way to meet my own value for being considerate of other people. I value consideration and awareness of other people's needs. And I didn't live up to that in that moment. So I have a moment of mourning. And mourning is a kind of natural pain that isn't constrictive. But we can feel natural mourning when we feel sadness. because we did not live according to our own value system, our own need for, in this case, consideration or care for the other. So when we mourn, when we have an unmet need, it's not a constrictive feeling if it's mourning as I'm defining it. There's a sense of the depth of sadness, a kind of inner poignancy, a sweet pain that's been called, so to speak, when we're feeling the sadness of something that we have deeply value, perhaps, and was not met in that situation. Okay. So I'd like to move on with this, the NVC. The first point was all of this was around NVC needs and the consciousness around needs. And then the second part, number 2, is around the premises underlying the consciousness of NVC. When we first approach the learning of NVC, there are premises. And my definition of a premise is not a belief, but it's a perspective that I'm acting as if it's so. You don't have to believe it. But my experience is as we practice nonviolent communication, the premises become more of a direct experience. And one of the it's the first one we've made reference to it, is that all human beings have the same basic needs. These human needs are universal. Now the physical needs are easy to identify and say, yes, we all have the same needs for food and shelter and physical well-being and our basic survival needs. Then there's another whole set of needs that you could regard as emotional, interpersonal, spiritual needs, understanding, integrity, authenticity, trust, connection. So the premise is that we all have the same needs as human beings, regardless of culture. Then another part of the next part of that is that everything that human beings do, everything that we do, is in the service of a need or needs. Every action, every word that we utter is an attempt to meet a need. Now we know that every human action doesn't appear that way, particularly if it stimulates pain or hurt in other people. But I think it's an important thing to understand. That means that every action that does not fulfill needs, every action that we can call violence or criticism or aggression that creates pain, is a tragic expression of needs. But it's important to see that the perspective of compassion, the perspective of nonviolent communication, is that no matter what a human being is doing, they're trying to meet a need. And if I see that, if I truly see that, I am always seeing the humanity in that person. Always seeing the humanity in that person. When we are able to encompass, to some degree, these premises that all human beings have the same needs, every action, every utterance is an expression of that need, an attempt to meet the need or needs. And if I see that, and all criticism and violence and judgments are tragic expressions of needs. If I truly see that, it means that I can only see the humanity in people's actions. And for me, that is the foundation of compassion. To be able to have an open space to see, to connect to, and attempt to connect to that humanity and their human needs in other people. Part of that, this next part, it can be one of the most challenging parts when we begin to practice NVC, is that given that, that means that every human being, if they're doing or saying something that seems judgmental, that we can regard as violent, is doing the very best they can. They're doing all that they know how to do, given their contact with their inner resources, given their access with themselves. So I'm just going to put it out there, just go through this and let it sit with you however it sits with you. So when we operate and practice from these premises, we approach other human beings. And when we approach other human beings, our intention is to connect with them. So it's our intention in communicating with people is I want to find out what your feelings and needs are, and I want to reveal mine so that we can connect. Connection is a state of mutual awareness and valuing of my needs and your needs. When we can do that, and we can come to that place, then magic can happen. We can heal our previous disconnection or lack of contact or communication. For me, that's the heart of what NVC is about. So much of this work is dependent on coming to our authenticity, finding ways to translate or transform our own life-alienating ways of operating, judging and criticizing ourselves, and coming to the authenticity of our feelings and needs. When we're able to do that, we enter into dialogue based on that heart, authentic awareness as much as we're able to. Then the components that we learn of NVC, that we can bring in our authenticity and make a clear observation, and out of that connection, requests will emerge from that quality of the connection. But the heart of it is the connection. So that's really all I wanted to say, just to bring forth at least my understanding of what NVC consciousness is. Does anybody have any response or questions to any of that? Okay. I think what, do you all want a short break, stretch break right now? No, actually, we haven't been going for an hour yet, so I think maybe we can go a little bit longer. I wanted to, I'm thinking about time for a lunch break, and given that we started at 10, I'm wondering how maybe 12:30 sounds to you all. Would that work? And at that point, we'll just talk about the length of it in terms of people being able to get lunch and so on. Okay. I want to talk about the primary focus of today. Yes?
I guess a response here would be, it seems like there's some previous steps involved in even if you find it hard to be around certain people, family say, it seems like meditation is important. There's self-empathy, obviously that's really key, but do you find it helpful to take people in small doses when you have difficulty sort of bringing up the path, you know, in practicing? Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, in difficult situations where you have difficulty communicating with someone,
Yes.
like family members.
Yeah, you just sort of decide when to be with them, or if it's important enough to make the effort sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's important. That I always recommend to people that, not always, it may not always be the most life-serving recommendation, but if you're learning a process like NVC, is that try with the small steps first before you try to transform your life by trying to communicate with difficult family members. So it's always a little bit encouraging to have some success before you have a grand failure. And say, this doesn't work. I tried on the most difficult person in my life and didn't work, so this stuff must not be very good. So, self-compassion. I'm wanting to do a demonstration, and I've done a lot of talking, and I'm hoping you're able to at least take this in on more than just a conceptual level. But I guess I want to start by sharing my understanding of what a kind of a basic approach, I think, is to self and to self-experience, the internal experience. That for me is the heart of self-compassion. Those moments when we are in our most painful or distressing experiences within ourselves are moments in which we experience this internal knot of experience, constriction, some contractions, tension, kind of internal distress. Our usual approach to that experience, and I'm just saying, is when we approach it, what we've learned how to do, how to manage this, is to varying forms of avoid it. Let's avoid this pain. Let's analyze the pain. Let's try to fix the pain. Let's try to do something other than create a space in which we just unconditionally allow that internal experience simply to be as it is without trying to change it. This pattern, this approach of attempting to change our inner experience when we are in this inner distressing can become a pervasive pattern of how we live our life. And one of the ways this manifests is, can we perhaps explore and examine your life? Has there been a pattern in your life to try to change who you are? Try to improve who you are. Try to get better. Fix yourself or heal yourself. Just notice that. And I'm not meaning this as a judgment. I'm meaning this as simply a self-observation exercise. Just notice in you if there has been that pattern to try to change, to try to heal, try to make yourself better in any way. My sense of this pattern to try to change and heal, my understanding, and I know I'm speaking in broad generalities, so it may not necessarily relate to your own unique internal experience. But in this broad perspective, that tendency to want to change and improve and fix and heal is a form of a pervasive resistance it is to simply being who we are and accepting the quality of our experience, creating an open spaciousness to who and what we are, and allowing that simply to be, without an attempt to make ourselves better.
Isn't that why we're here?
If it is, I'm trying to address that. If you're here to try to make yourself better, I'm not confident that that is the best way for you to get what it is that I think there is an inner impulse behind how we interpret. The interpretation is we're trying to make ourselves better. But for me, to reach that life impulse, the best way to do that is not to try to make yourself better. It's a very different way.
Robert, I'm hearing trust in that.
Yes.
If I'm really with myself, I won't see something ugly that
Yes.
needs to be changed, that
Exactly.
the natural giving, the natural compassion
Yeah.
can then emerge. It's already there.
Yeah. So even as I speak, if you can invite this within yourself or if it comes up spontaneously, if there's an element of your life, a habit, a pattern, something that you've tried to change, just notice your own inner experience as I'm sharing this concept. That when there's something that in our understanding, in our training, we've come to a place where we say, I want to change this, I want to make it better, I want to heal it, I want to transform it. Notice how you meet that which you want to change, that internal something. It's not just a concept. I think that when we want to change something, we want to heal something, it's an experience. It's a visceral, lived experience. That when we have that moment, those moments of, let's just say, I'm a person who wants to feel more comfortable with other people. And when I get around, I can't speak in groups, or I don't share what I'm really authentically and honestly feeling, because I'm afraid if I do that, I'm going to make myself vulnerable, and I'm going to be hurt if people judge me. Does that ring true for anybody? Yes.
What if you have a tendency with everything you're describing to not necessarily want to change yourself, but other people?
Same thing. It's the same thing. It's just a different focus. Because when you want to change other people, what you're actually doing is you're wanting to change your internal experience of other people. So you're wanting to manipulate the environment so you can feel better within yourself. So for me, it's the same thing, just different strategy.
It seems like when you
Pain, inner pain or distress. It's like a knot. And we experience it in different ways. And it moves and it fluctuates, but there's a sense of something that is internal. Say I'm self-conscious, this is the example I gave. I really want to be honest, I really want to be more upfront with you, have a closer relationship, but I'm too scared because I don't trust the relationship. I don't trust that you're going to be able to accept me and understand me. So wherever that came from, there may be a core belief associated with that I'm unworthy, I'm no good, I'm not, whatever it is, somehow deficient. So in life, so when we approach this kind of inner fear, when we're resisting it, we in some form tell ourselves that we have to get over this, we have to get through it, we have to change it. Any of those forms of approaching it is a form of saying, to ourselves or to this inner experience, you're not okay the way you are. I'm not okay the way I am. Therefore, I want to change it. And sometimes that resistance is more subtle. Sometimes we're not even that conscious that we say we want to change this fear reaction. It could even be an anger reaction. It could be any form of internal distress. So if there's anything that we want to change with ourselves or other people, as I'm defining this, it's a form of resisting what is, if we want to change it or heal it. Yes?
There's a piece of confusion for me because it seems to me that in looking at the path that we have as children, perhaps, there were some messages delivered that weren't very healthy or helpful. And so, for me, it's like, I want to be able to choose that doesn't serve me well, that I don't like feeling that way about myself, that I don't want to continue to do that to me. And so I am going to change how I see myself, and I am going to choose to do it differently.
Yeah. And I would agree that is, for those people who have come to those ways of approaching, that has perhaps yielded some kind of shift in a different way in which they've approached themselves and other people. I'm also suggesting that there's something fundamental in that basic approach to oneself that still carries some self-resistance. Something at the heart of it that in itself, not cognitively necessarily or consciously, that says, I believe in the messages that there's something wrong with me. There's something that I need to change. Something inherent in my internal reaction, even inherent in my fear reaction. That instead of entering into the heart of the fear, I try to get over it. Some version of that. So what I'm suggesting is that when we are in an internal kind of restriction, call it a wounding, a place of vulnerability that we have created protective mechanisms around. We've mechanisms and structures of protection. Is that what we have done is perpetuated that tendency to restrict and to pull in our basic life energies. And that what I'm suggesting is self-compassion is a radically different way of approaching our inner pain. It's actually, instead of wanting to get over it, it's a way of creating space for it. So if I'm scared, there's something in me, some element in me, that is reaching for life in that fear. If I'm angry, if I'm judging, instead of trying to manipulate the environment about change other people's behavior, I want to enter into that internal experience of the anger itself and open to that, because there's a precious message in the wound. There's a precious message in what has not been looked at. What has not been looked at is a shadow, in the sense that the light of awareness has not shined on that shadow. And for me, the definition of healing is that when we're able to shine the light of awareness through presence, through compassion, instead of changing, instead of trying to heal our fear, we say to our fear, you are welcome, internally. We say to our anger, we say to our loneliness, we say to whatever habituated patterns of distress that we experience over and over again, we say, stop, to ourselves. I'm not going to change you. I'm going to welcome the life impulse that's held inside that wounding. So it's a radically different way of approaching this inner life.
I have a practical question. I'm really uncomfortable with the air conditioning. And I'm wondering what's the need in the room? I would love it to be turned off. But
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't hear.
She said she's uncomfortable with the air conditioning. She'd like to know if there's other people who would be willing to have it turned off. Are you too cold?
Can we turn the fans on?
It's cold and drafty.
Drafty, okay.
It's gonna get very, very
Yeah.
hot
It
in here
will.
Yeah.
It's not.
Well, I asked her to turn it on because I was actually very warm at the beginning personally, and I'm concerned that
Maybe
it's,
wanna move into a different.
is there a possibility to move so that you're not in the draft?
I just wanted to check,
Yeah.
because other people also told me that they were cold.
Yeah,
So I just
okay.
wanted to check.
Yeah,
I'll turn it off if you want, but
Well,
it's gonna
bring
get
it
hot.
down.
It gets warm in here.
yeah.
Bring it down.
I did take it down. It's down to, it's up to 75.
Well, I think there's a couple of
It's
options.
not air conditioning, it's a swamp.
Yeah, it's, number one, we could turn it down or off. I'm concerned
Can we use the fans?
it's gonna get warm.
That's what it is.
Or people who are cold can cover themselves up, which people who are hot don't have that option to take their clothes off. Or they do, but that's a different workshop.
Well, you know,
So,
maybe it could be on when we're gone for lunch to cool it down.
yeah.
I don't want to put anybody into
Yeah.
suffering mode. I can also sit somewhere else.
Would you be willing to try sitting in another place and see if that works for you? Great. And we'll do a check within the room. Did you turn it off, Kate?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You want it off?
No, actually, I want it on.
It's
We were
on.
work-
It's up to 78, so.
Okay, the temperature in the room is 78. But is it at the same level it was?
I turned it up, so it's hotter.
Oh, that's to me the opposite. You turned it so that it's hotter. Turned
The
it.
fan is still on, but I turned it up so the temperature would be higher
Yeah. Okay.
rather than.
Could you turn it back to where it was? I appreciate it. Because there really wasn't a request to turn it
Okay.
off yet. We were
It's not off.
doing a check. Yeah. And we'll check with you to see if that works for you to sit there in the sun. I'm hoping. Was there anybody else that was uncomfortable? Too cold? Okay. Thank you. Great. Yes.
I'm aware of having to regulate, so I have a wool shawl I brought. I guess
Oh,
I
great.
always have to regulate my end of it, being
Yeah.
a skinny person.
Yeah. Okay. So, yes.
So, it sounds like what you're saying is that by the internal judge, I've got to change something about me.
Yeah.
In a sense, you're attaching a shame or
Yeah.
blame.
Yes.
It's preventing the exploration of that.
Yeah. Yes. We attach some story, some blame, some shame that says it's not okay. There's something wrong. And I regard it as a form of self-violence. We do violence to ourselves when we take the very essence of something that's precious and alive in us, because it has a certain form, because it has whatever form it is, that we do violence to ourselves by turning away from that very life energy in the form of a constriction, a pain, whatever it is. And we turn away from it. We turn away from ourselves. So compassion is a radically different approach to our inner life. It has the same principle in relationship to others. When we judge others, we turn away from the life impulse in them. We want to fix them, we want to make them better, we judge them in some way. So for me, the principle of compassion, the essence of compassion, is an open spaciousness. And in that open spaciousness, the message of that, verbally and non-verbally, is whatever it is that's there is invited. It's okay. that life in you is precious, is valuable. And what happens when this invitation occurs, when we do it for ourselves or we receive that open, spacious awareness from another, is this, how can I describe this? There are these protective structures here that are rigid, unmovable, frozen. When in the space of empathy, when we have had empathic compassion and someone who's empathically approached us, when we are in a place of suffering, there's something in that hardness that begins to soften. And then the softening shifts into vulnerability. And frozen fear becomes vulnerable fear. And then something begins to quiver inside of us in some way, move. And then we're able to touch some authentic yearning or pain in that. There's always a yearning for something in the heart of our pain. And in the yearning, there's always a yearning for some quality of unconditional acceptance, for love, to be seen. In each wounding, in each constriction, there's always a sense of yearning. And we find that there's always a quality of innocence to that energy. And that innocence sometimes carries the image of the child who's been hurt and wounded, wherein those basic decisions and conclusions have been made in early childhood, where we've made the decision to, I'm never going to open up again, look what happened, I was hurt. I'm not going to allow myself to be vulnerable, to be open, I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to protect myself by withdrawing, or I'm going to protect myself by creating a persona and an aura of confidence. Whatever it is, there are forms of protection if we don't really allow the spaciousness of that inner wounding to come forth. And this is the heart of the self-compassion.
When we're listening and getting in touch and connecting with that pain, and find it difficult to really kind of hear the need behind that.
Yes.
It's like, I'm very familiar with the protection and the wounding.
Yes.
It's how, is it just that you really just have to sit there with it and let the need emerge, or how does that work?
Well, I'll show you. Talking about it is one thing. I can make a little bit of reference to it. But it really is about more spaciousness. To really, if you're familiar with the wounding and the protection, there's something in that wounding and the protection that wants to be heard also. You hear the voice of the protection, and that voice might say, I'm not going to do this. I'm too scared. Even that is invited. Even that is not asked to change. Even that we don't say we have to get through you so that we can get into the need or the deeper vulnerability. So one of the principles of empathy, as we learned at NVC, is empathy is a quality of presence. There is no fixing. The intention is not to fix. It's not to try to do something with the other person. It's not even to try to heal them. The intention of empathy is not to try to move some person from this constricted, painful place to a place in which they're feeling free and healed. That's not empathy. There's an agenda with that kind of an intention. Empathic, compassionate presence is about an open, spacious awareness within ourselves and other people that says, I will not judge you. I want to connect to that life that's expressing in you in whatever form, even if it comes across as judgment, as fear. Because only when that part of us is given that space to be and to express itself can the natural unfolding occur, wherein that precious life is actually heard, and that's where the yearning and the longing touches the need, reveals the need.
What's the difference between compassion and empathy in your reference that you're using?
I'm using them fairly synonymously. Could say, if there's a subtle distinction, that compassion is a quality of awareness and presence that is spacious. Empathy is the application of that in relationship, something like that. Yes?
Could you repeat the part that you said a few minutes ago about yearning, a longing, and when we get to that?
When we're able to, with ourselves or with another person, in a presence of non-judgmental, no agenda, when that presence, that awareness carries a message to the life form, that life energy. When that painful structure meets presence, there's an invitation to relax and to unfold. When that unfolding occurs, it's not something that I do or the other person does. It's the natural unfolding and the evolution of that life impulse. When that life impulse comes to light, it often takes the form of a yearning or longing. So that if...
Would you say that another root to that might be a slight sense of being haunted by goodness, or it's not that you're separate from it, it's not that kind of yearning, it's
Yeah.
a different kind of yearning where you...
The word is yearning.
Yearning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a longing for...
It's a different, but it's not, what is it a longing for? Because
It's, well...
it seems to me it's sort of both and at that point. That you're longing, but that's just a feeling that actually doesn't need any object.
Yeah, I would agree. It's not a yearning for a condition
Right.
or a behavior, but it's yearning for a quality of being.
Right.
Which-
you're actually already touching.
Yes, you're touching.
So you're longing for what you
Yes.
actually are experiencing.
Yes. It's not a longing for something external or extrinsic.
Right.
It's an internal longing for the quality that already exists within us, innately. But here's the trick. I'm not going to spend a lot of time into this, but it's valuable, is that when we have that inner wounding for us, it's a very young part of us. Developmentally, part of the healing process is that it does require an external presence to create that for us, because we're not able to create it for ourselves. So this is why a loving community is so important, whether it's a community of one, two, or many, wherein there's a high value for compassion and empathy. Because that inner part of us that is wounded, that is healed only in the presence of a compassionate, loving presence, requires that. And when that happens in a way that actually works, it awakens the inner presence so that we can then do it for ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what we're going to be practicing, the model, the map or the inner pathway that I'm going to be showing you is around how we approach this within ourselves. I'm going to do it with other people. I'm going to suggest that you work with yourselves with this process as a learning process. And I'm hoping that it'll be valuable for you, that you can carry this as an inner pathway. A lot of the work that I do, I find valuable in the sense that I see